Just that she interrupts you.
That's fine. See, I'm going to talk on a few different areas to those Kim mentioned last time, and also give a few little updates on some of the areas she touched on. And I'm going to broadly be covering three areas, some current and upcoming consultations and changes in legislation, a couple of interesting recent cases, and then just a couple of kind of key areas that we're still seeing in the spotlight. So first of all, looking at consultations and legislation. So there's a consultation just recently launched on dismissal and re-engagement, and employers dismissing and re-engaging to try and push through changes in terms and conditions of employment has been very topical. And Matthew and Jenny actually covered this in their talk at an HR Focus towards the end of last year. Now, on the 24th of January, the government opened a new consultation on a draft code of practice that sets out employers' responsibilities when they're seeking to change terms and conditions. It gives a step-by-step process that an employer should follow to explore alternatives to dismissing and to engage in meaningful consultation. It makes really clear that employers should not use threats of dismissal as a negotiating tactic, and states that once it's clear employees are not going to accept proposed new terms, they should be re-examining business strategy and plans. So that consultation started at the end of January and it closes on the 18th of April. So there'll be an update on that a little bit later on this year. Another bill which is quite interesting is the Workers' Predictable Terms and Conditions Bill, and the government announced at the start of February that they're going to be supporting that. And essentially what that do is to allow workers and agency workers a statutory right to request a predictable work pattern in certain circumstances. So where they have a very unpredictable work pattern, they will be allowed to make an application to have better predictability. They'll be allowed to make 2 applications a year. And there might be a minimum service requirement of 26 weeks for that, potentially. And a bit like with flexible working requests, employers and work agencies and hirers will be able to reject an application for certain statutory grounds. And again, as with other kind of statutory rights, workers and agency workers would have a right not to suffer a detriment because they'd made an application or they'd brought a claim relating to that. And it would be automatically unfair dismissal if you dismissed an employee for making an application. So again, quite an interesting new area and one to watch out for a little bit later this year if that does progress through Parliament. Another one, just a very quick update on, Kim mentioned last time a couple of quite important bills, and they have just progressed slightly, so I'll just touch on those. So the Redundancy, Pregnancy and Family Leave Bill and the Carers Leave Bill. So essentially the redundancy bill aims to extend protection against redundancy kind of after maternity leave, adoption leave and shared parental leave. So to give that further 6-month protection following the end of a period of leave. And the Carers Leave Bill is aiming to give unpaid carers the right to 1 week's unpaid leave a year for caring responsibilities. They've gone all the way through the House of Commons now and they've got to the House of Lords. So they're all progressing through nicely and it looks likely that they will be introduced in due course. Another very topical area for a bill, strikes minimum service levels bill. We've all been really enjoying all the strikes to post and trains and buses and everything else. And there's been, again, quite a well publicised bill in relation to that, which has now, again, gone all the way through the House of Commons and it's heading to the House of Lords. And essentially what that is aiming to do, if it is introduced, is to allow the government to make some regulations to set minimum service level requirements during a strike in certain areas. So things like health, transport, education, fire and rescue, border control, and then nuclear decommissioning and radioactive waste management, which is a bit random. So essentially just to stop the country kind of grinding to a halt in those areas where there is strike action. So obviously quite a kind of a topical and hopefully quite welcome change in the law if that does proceed through. And then the last one that I'm going to touch on, which is a really important one, is called the Worker Protection Amendment of Equality Act bill. Now, that's also got through the House of Commons already and is now at the House of Lords. It's still got a little bit further to go, but if it is passed, and we expect it will be, it will come into force a year later, and it's going to make some really key changes to the Equality Act in relation to the area of harassment mainly. And essentially what it's proposing to do is to impose a duty on an employer to take all reasonable steps to prevent harassment by a third party. So, for example, you may not harass an employee within your business, but a client or a customer or a supplier might harass one of your employees. And what they're proposing to do is change the Equality Act so that if you fail to take all reasonable steps to prevent a third party harassing your employee, you will be treated as having committed that harassment yourself. So obviously a huge change in the law and very kind of significant. And there'll be a new duty, as I say, to take all reasonable steps to prevent harassment. And that's a duty that can be enforced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And also, if a tribunal finds you have breached a duty, obviously assuming this all comes in, to take those steps to prevent the sexual harassment, they can increase compensation awarded by 25%, up to 25%. So this is a really kind of big change if it comes into force that will really hike the responsibilities and the potential financial penalties for employers relating to not just sexual harassment, but that's kind of the key focus. So that's all the kind of consultation and bills. I'm just going to touch briefly on a couple of really interesting cases that have been recently published. And I'm happy to share all the kind of case names and bill names afterwards. I haven't done any slides. This one is called, if I can pronounce it right, Leafar-Cease and Western Sussex University Hospitals NHS. And this is quite an interesting case. Where it went to appeal in the Employment Appeal Tribunal. And essentially in the case, the claimant was an associate director of transformation in an NHS trust and was responsible for improving racial equality. And she was actually disciplined for bullying and victimisation and received a final written warning. Now, during that kind of period of time, the Care Quality Commission conducted an inspection, and they found that at that trust there was a lot of bullying, and they put the trust into special measures. And the new management felt that the claimant simply was not a suitable person to be leading on equality and diversity when she herself had been found to have, breached that area. So they reopened the disciplinary process that they'd previously had with her and given her a final written warning, and they dismissed her. And she was obviously quite unhappy about that and brought an unfair dismissal claim, which she lost, and she then appealed. So what I'm now touching on is essentially that appeal. And she basically said, it's not fair. It's just not fair as a matter of law. I had a disciplinary process. I was given a final written warning. You can't go back and revisit that and then decide to dismiss me. It's just fundamentally unfair. And actually, the Employment Appeal Tribunal said no. In those circumstances, it was fair to reopen the disciplinary process, and they did not allow her appeal. So it's quite a significant case for employers, because I think often people feel if you've had a process, that's it, you can't go back to it, you can't revisit it. And generally that is the case. You have to be very careful, but it's quite helpful for businesses to have this, appeal judgment, which essentially says in some circumstances, if you've got a rationale and a fair reason, it may be okay to go back and to reopen a disciplinary process. So just one that I wanted to touch on. And the other one, which I wanted to talk about, is relating to private WhatsApp messages. Now, in this case, the employer dismissed an employee for misconduct, and she brought an employment tribunal claim. Now, during the claim, her employer obtained 18,000 of her private WhatsApp messages, and they used them as evidence against her in the tribunal. And she said, they have hacked into my phone. And the respondent said, no, we didn't. We found them on your work laptop after you were dismissed. And she was obviously very unhappy that they had done this. And she actually brought a claim to the High Court for misuse of private information. Now, the employer has applied to strike out that claim, and they said, look, misconduct, we found the messages, it's perfectly reasonable to rely on them. And they asked for her claim to be struck out. And the High Court has refused and said that that's an attempt to stifle her claim. They said that her WhatsApp messages were private messages from the claimant to her partner and friend about her professional, social and private life, including her health and sex life. And it was obvious that she would have a reasonable expectation of privacy, which it appeared that the employer had breached. And I flag this not because it's an area we can touch on in 2 minutes. It's just a minefield, the area of kind of monitoring and what you can use and what you can't use. But I just think it's a really interesting one to flag, because people do find messages or try and get messages and use them in disciplinary processes, in tribunal claims. And it's a bit of a cautionary tale that even if you might do that, there could then be a repercussion. So I think perhaps it's an area to revisit in a future session, but I just thought it was a really interesting case. And finally, I'm just going to touch on very briefly 2 other areas which we've talked about before, but there's just been some interesting developments on. So the first is menopause, and obviously we've talked about menopause quite a lot over kind of the last year or so, actually, we'll be aware that MP Caroline Nokes actually kicked off an investigation into the impact menopause had back in 2021. An inquiry was set up, and in 2022 we got a report on that which made a number of recommendations. And some of the recommendations included introducing menopause as a protected characteristic in the Equality Act, which we've talked about, potentially introducing menopausal leave, and also introducing a duty for employers to make reasonable adjustments for people that were experiencing menopause. And actually, it's taken the government really quite a long time to respond to that report, and they did that very recently. And essentially, they have largely rejected all of the recommendations that came out of that report. Specifically, and kind of perhaps critically, they've refused to make menopause a protected characteristic. And they've said that they will not be introducing any specific kind of menopausal leave. And their rationale for that is that if you start to do that, you could almost be, for example, menopausal leave, they say, might force women out of work by insensitivity and rigid sickness policies. They've suggested that menopause shouldn't be a protected characteristic, and there should be no duty to make reasonable adjustments, because that could have unintended consequences. They've not really said what they are, and inadvertently create new forms of discrimination. But they have agreed to launch a public health campaign and to appoint a menopause ambassador. So Caroline Nokes, who chaired that initial committee, has been very vocal and critical about the government's response to all of the work that they had done. Saying it's a missed opportunity. They've ignored a real significant amount of evidence on menopause and the impact of menopause. So where we are at the moment is that there is going to be no added protection in law for people in the workplace with menopausal symptoms. But as I say, there's a lot of vocal criticism of that. So whether we will see anything else come later this year. So just a reminder really that, at the moment, the protection for menopausal symptoms will still be linked potentially to sex discrimination, age discrimination, and potentially disability discrimination, but nothing more than that at the moment. And then lastly, just very quickly, coming back to sexual harassment, obviously, again, this has been a huge topic over the last few years. I've already talked about the changes that might be made to the Equality Act to really be kind of dealing with this more specifically. But I just wanted to touch on the recent news that McDonald's has signed a binding agreement with the Equality and Human Rights Commission to improve their handling of sexual harassment allegations. You may well have seen this in the news, but essentially there has been over recent years a huge number of complaints of harassment within McDonald's. They've not published the number of complaints, but they've estimated more than 1,000 in 2019. And because of concerns relating to that, the Equality and Human Rights Commission has entered into a kind of a binding agreement with McDonald's, because they think that they've been committing an unlawful act. And they have essentially signed a legal agreement with the Equality and Human Rights Commission, where they've committed to taking quite a few steps to try and address the issue. So they're going to be offering a zero tolerance approach to sexual harassment, which, you know, arguably that should be the case already. Anonymous surveys, enhanced policies, and anti-harassment training for managers. Again, you know, you're probably doing all of those things already, but I just think it's quite interesting that such a big company being in the news for this does just again re-bring the spotlight back onto sexual harassment and harassment kind of widely, and just a reminder really for businesses of the importance of making sure you have got your policies and processes and training in place. And that's me for today. Thank you.
That's great, Sarah. Thank you very much. There's a lot to pick up on there, I think. So some things that we can pick up. I agree that WhatsApp message and what communications is always an interesting one in terms of what people can use and not use, and what you see and what you don't see. And it's quite difficult to unsee something if you see it on someone's phone or anything like that, and how that might prejudice or what you might try and find. So yeah, I think that's quite an interesting one. I have to say, I was quite vocal about the government on Twitter and stuff about the government's rejection of those recommendations on the menopause as well. It was horrendous. What's the point of doing all of that work when they go, yeah, no, it's fine, thanks.
Yeah.
But so maybe we have picked up some of those things, and yeah, the McDonald's was interesting, as you say. Some of those things you expect companies to be doing as a matter of course. So that's good. And any observations, any questions for Sarah? Anybody got? No? I'm going to hand over to Daniel, if that's all right then, and we'll pick up some of those other things. So Daniel is Head of Client Services at Wagada Digital. So, and I say, just recently did a seminar on this, and we just thought it was a very topical opportunity to have a look at what some of the things that Wagada Digital are talking to their clients. So, all right, to hand over to you, Daniel.
No problem at all. Brilliant. Thank you, Suzanne. Can I just check? Can people see the front slide now on your screen? Have you got that? The front slide of the deck? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So, really good to meet some of you for the first time and see a couple of familiar faces as well. So, yeah, really excited to talk to you today a little bit about the recruitment crisis, this kind of long-term recruitment crisis that we've been sort of facing over the last 2 to 3 years, and how we can actually tackle that with something called employer branding. So my name's Daniel Jenkins. As Suzanne rightly mentioned, I'm Head of Client Services at Wagada Digital. We are a strategy-led and results-focused digital marketing agency with offices in St Albans in Hertfordshire and also in Cheltenham. So we offer the full kind of 360-degree digital marketing mix with specialists across a number of different tactics and channels. And we work with businesses across the UK and internationally as well. Let's talk a little bit about this recruitment crisis and what that actually looks like, what it actually means, because it's been in a bit of a yo-yo, as I'm sure we know, for the last sort of couple of years. What we've seen is a lot of kind of labour shortages. You know, the cost of living crisis has had a massive impact on everything, really, and what people are looking for: higher wages, being able to, or perhaps not being able to, compete with competitors who can offer perhaps higher wages at times. Sort of what was called the Great Resignation, and this real period of shift whereby, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of people moved from one job to another, which in turn has led to people not being in roles for a particularly long period of time, which then means that they're not really looking to move again. So hence the shortages in key sectors and key roles. And there's been a real shift in kind of employee needs, really, in what we call kind of the old world versus the new world. So when you think previously, there was much more a mindset of kind of working to make a living, which for the last couple of years has become more about kind of purpose and your purpose within employment and what your employer's purpose is, and that whole piece. What's interesting with that is that it's constantly changing, because over the last few months, obviously, again, coming back to the cost of living crisis, those financial repercussions are having a big knock-on effect as well. Obviously, the difference between commuting to work and now being able to connect and work from anywhere. But where people previously valued benefits, people now value people. Like, it really matters who you're working for, who you're working with, what they're about, and what the brand is about. And previously, where people used to very, very heavily juggle work and life, and the two didn't really work in tandem or in synergy. Obviously, employees now are looking much, much more at that sort of work-life balance and how to get that right. So how can we actually tackle that as businesses, or with businesses that we're working with? Well, first of all, from a recruitment perspective, what is often lacking is clear and defined objectives. So we all know that, businesses want to hire the best staff and, the best fit for the business. But how do you actually turn those into what we would call proper SMART objectives? So real kind of measurable objectives. And we'll often work with clients to go, right, let's really identify those. And sometimes it could be reducing time to hire by 20% in 6 months. Meaning, we want to make sure that the lead time between a job ad going live to the point at which we hire has reduced by 20%. Maybe there are mid-funnel goals, like, you might want to increase page views to key recruitment landing pages by 25% in the next 6 months. So you want to drive engagement, make sure you're getting the right traffic to land on your website. Or maybe it's even bigger than that, and top of the funnel, in that you just need to reach people. Maybe you're not yet reaching the right type of people and getting the right kind of messages to them. And when you lay out those objectives that might start with 2 or 3 but grow to 5 or 6, it's going to help focus the activity in line with that. And from our perspective, and a lot of businesses that we work with, it's really important that marketing and HR are aligned in this. More and more, we're seeing that the objectives might be set initially from HR, in terms of what a business needs to achieve on a recruitment level, but then it feeds through and it filters through into the marketing function to then support with achieving those goals. So the two really should work very, very closely in synergy in order to ultimately achieve the overarching kind of recruitment objectives. And what's the solution to this? Well, I'm going to talk for the next sort of 10 minutes or so around employer branding. So an employer brand is a set of attributes and qualities, often intangible, that makes a company distinctive and attractive. And I'm going to show you some real life examples, some big brand examples, some examples of how that can work very, very effectively in order to achieve success. So first and foremost, it is about more clearly identifying what makes a company different. And what we see a lot of is that brands tend to be very, very good at this with marketing to their customers. So they're really, really good at going, oh, these are our USPs. These are what stand us apart. This is why you should buy from us or choose us over the competition. But they don't tap into the needs of the target audience from a recruitment perspective. How many times do we see on a job ad those like 5, 6, 7 bullet points that are like, X days holiday, you get a day off on your birthday, pizza Fridays, and it always sounds, it's very generic, it's kind of off the shelf. And actually, how about talking a bit more about your employees, speaking directly to them, what they might want, what they might value, rather than just a set of generic things that you do as a business. And at the heart of that is your company values. Now, it took me a long time, I think, as an individual to realize genuinely that I'm a values-led person. Values are actually really important to me as a person. My family, we're values-led, and a lot of people are values-led. They warm to other people or other entities or other organizations that share those values. So, there's some buzzwords there like integrity, honesty, passion, openness. But what are the values of your business, or your client's business? Do their team know the values? If they literally went around a room and said, what are our company's values? Can people roll them off the tongue? Really, that should be at the forefront of all of your messaging, all of your communications, and ultimately what the business's identity is as a brand. So at Wagada, we're passionate, honest, flexible, human. They roll off the tongue. If I ask any member of my team, they'd be able to tell you like that. And it's so important that those are effectively communicated through content marketing, job ads, because they've become more and more prevalent to employees and people that are looking for more of a purpose within their role, rather than quite simply what's the paycheck and how many hours do I work. So again, some examples here. Are you human? Do you pride yourself on innovation, respect, belonging, passionate, a commitment to one another? And then it's not just about having those values, but it's about coming back to them to go, are we utilizing these? Are we referencing these within copy and content? So are we clearly articulating and demonstrating that on LinkedIn, on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, if that's where our target market hang out? Are we putting it on our job ads? You know, are we making sure that we're utilizing this language throughout? Because then we are going to build a proper kind of employer brand. Culture has also become more and more important. What is the workplace culture? What is the community? What does the day-to-day look like? And you have to strike a very, very fair balance there. So what do I mean by that? Well, some brands can fall foul of almost showing themselves as being too much about fun, too lightweight, too much about the holistic areas of the job, and not actually honestly presenting the challenges and the tough times and why you might have an opportunity to stretch yourself within that organization. And really demonstrating that balance of culture is fundamentally important in order to establish a good employer brand. Are we highlighting to employees how they're going to be perhaps outside their comfort zone at times, but guess what, the balance is great because you get X amount of training and development and will navigate you on a career path? Are we making sure that we're giving a fair representation of what day-to-day life is at the building and within the company? And what then are those attitudes and behaviors of the company and its employees? Is it surrounding family, being supportive? Is it about aspirational, being valued, having a shared goal? Is it about empowerment? This is something that people look for a lot. Will you be empowered to evolve, to develop, all those things? I'm not going to labour this point too much. Obviously, flexible working has become more and more a requirement nowadays of people. But what's your brand stance on that? And if it is something that's being offered, in what way is that being offered? It's become an expectation that there's a degree of flexible working. And it doesn't always mean kind of working from home. And again, as a brand, you need to get that right. Something that's really interesting is I see some businesses that take a very kind of 2023 and sort of, I guess, liberal approach towards you get a day off if XYZ for your dog and things like that. And it's interesting, some of the conversation earlier surrounding sort of menopause and attitude towards that within flexible learning, working. But what's your company stance on that? Because I'm a dad, I'm quite a young dad, and what made a huge difference for me at Wagada is that my employer put fantastic things in place for new dads, because actually there is so much that is there for mums in terms of the length of mat leave, the some of the salary repercussions, the positive if you've been at a company for a couple of years. But dads, even now, I think, are quite a forgotten segment within that, where it's an incredibly short period of time, it's unpaid, it's you don't get a day off before the day of birth, which is fascinating because my wife, for example, went into labor one day. We didn't have a baby until the early hours the next morning. And technically, my paternity leave shouldn't have started until that day, which just seems absurd. So there's so many things surrounding that, whereby as an employer, you have an opportunity there to put things in place for your employees, regardless of their background, their needs, their wants. And how are you clearly articulating that and the actual needs of your employees? And again, training and development, which I think is so fundamentally important. And I think people are looking for this a lot more. The average number of people that, as you probably know, that change roles throughout their life is something like 3 career changes. So those demographics, those segments are going to be expecting or requesting or wanting a degree of training and development. And how are you effectively demonstrating that as an employer? And ultimately, you need to put yourself in their shoes. So you need to think much more from the employee's perspective. What are they looking for? What do they want, rather than what you would naturally perhaps offer as an organization? Some nice examples here. Lloyd's kind of in terms of why joining them, they're highlighting those kind of key areas of what is fundamental to them as a business, well-being being a key one here. We encourage a culture of well-being and inclusivity. We recognize how diverse our workforce is. Inclusion and diversion is fundamentally key now as well in 2023, and what your brand stance is on that. But again, referencing health and well-being services and products to meet the varied needs of our colleagues. Look at that language as well surrounding our colleagues. It's not like the team. It's not even our team. They're saying our colleagues. So from an employer brand perspective, the brand is literally putting itself on exactly the same level as its colleagues and employees. And even those touches of language can be so important, from job listings to, as I say, online copy and creative. This is a company that we work with, actually, CAE, and they have, check them out online actually, because they have an incredible through line with the brand from their customer perspective, but also their sort of staffing perspective. And they talk about how their culture allows us to adapt and face any situation, in the knowledge that by being authentic, our customers, partners, and the wider community will see that delivering against our purpose is directly responsible for helping their success. You know, this is what makes us culture first. So they proudly present themselves as a culture first brand. And again, you know, the way that they do that makes them an incredibly desirable employer to work for, and a company to be a part of, to not just be employed by, but to be a part of. So really at the heart of that is developing your employer value proposition, your EVP, and that is what your company offers employees. So again, we're great at kind of mission statements and, you know, brand, value propositions, but have we considered our employer value proposition? I'm going to show you an example in a minute, but, you know, you base it on values. You ask your staff, what do they think it means to work at the business? How are you different, and how do you actually want to make people feel? Because that really is a one-off catch-all. Now, this is one we developed. We're really proud of this one. We workshopped it with a client, Churchill. We always do right. We are inclusive. We are empowering. We are human. And that was at the heart of who they were as a brand. And one of the first steps in terms of developing any good employer value, employer branding strategy, is to create that EVP, to go, right, this is our employer value proposition, this is what we're about. And then HR, marketing, sales, whoever it might be, senior management, are all aligned in terms of that vision as an employer and exactly what it is that they're offering the target market. And just finally then to chat about messaging a little bit more and those messages, because powerful messaging is going to be fundamentally key. You're often competing against yourself as a business, so you could be competing against Indeed, that's what I mean by that, you know, or other online job listings, and you go, well, we're spending X £1,000s a year to be listed in these places, and how can we better generate success? How can we get you know, registrations, applications, and so on, through our own channels? And powerful messaging is going to be at the heart of that. And some big brands do a great job of that. You know, H&M here, dare to be yourself and feel like you belong. They're literally, it's a call to arms. It's laying down the gauntlet to somebody, to perhaps a relatively young qualified demographic for certain roles, where they'd be saying, come on, we want you for who you are. Let's get you involved, and let's make sure that you feel that you belong. Interestingly, McDonald's, we've heard some negative things there, which actually suggests why they perhaps invest so heavily in their employer branding. McDonald's put a huge amount of stuff out there about who they are as a business and an organization and as a community, and what impression they want to give to the target market. ITV, don't just watch it, be a part of it, you know, feel like you are included within that. Again, these are really strong marketing messages that could come out of any strong marketing team, and we're used to seeing them when we're selling a product or a service, but we're less used to seeing them when we want to develop a strong employer brand and actually become the employer of choice. Again, another client of ours, All About Children, we developed the key message with them, all about children, when nothing without you. And that became a really powerful kind of through message that was then used across the core recruitment marketing activities, from creating video content to social media posts. Coming back to that, you know, when nothing without you really sort of spoke to employees that were either new to the childcare industry or were looking to move over from other nurseries and other education institutions to this, which is kind of a national national shared group, nationwide purpose, that vision and shared goal of building a stronger, kinder, greener society. You know, there's nothing in there about counting cash and checks and being a note teller. It's simply about the brand's vision and purpose as an organization that comes through at the heart of this message. And just my final slide, because I could talk about this for days, but is that employee journey. So when you think about all these things and who you are as a brand, have you really thought about where they work in the funnel and how our brand carries through in all these different stages? I'll make sure I'll send this over to you afterwards, Suzanne. I'll make sure everybody can get the deck so that you can kind of reference this in your own time. But there's a lovely little thing at the bottom there, which we use quite regularly in strategies, which is RACE. So reach, act, convert, engage. It's a simple kind of 4-step way of kind of getting in front of your target audience, enticing them to take an action, generating a conversion, and then engaging them afterwards. And this is just as valuable for recruitment marketing as it is for any other kind of marketing and advertising. And the top part is about identifying where those tactics sit in that funnel so that you actually get that ultimate goal, which is, you know, 20% increase in hires, 20% increase in applications, that sort of thing. But this model could be hugely beneficial for any recruitment marketing. So the takeaways: you want to establish your recruitment objectives. You want to create a solid EVP. What is that that actual purpose, that sort of mission? Develop your powerful messaging, and then decide on how you're going to get that out there, and how you're going to reach people and develop that employer brand. Oh, this is just, we've got something coming up in March, but again, you'll get all of this in the deck afterwards about HubSpot, and that's us.
That's brilliant, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Great, thank you. So that's great. A lot in there, so a lot to take in. So great that you can share the slides. That would be really helpful. People can have a think about what they're already doing and where the gaps are, because, like you said, there's no silver bullet in recruitment. As we've talked about a lot of occasions, it's lots of multiple things that organizations need to do to attract the right people into their organization. So maybe we can pick up on some of those strands with you guys, a couple of other sessions as well. So if that was all right with you, is there any anybody got any observations, some of the things they're doing, Mike or Tom or Amy, in terms of recruitment? Any, Mike?
Yeah, I'd certainly say it's great to hear somebody, an advocate of taking a strategic view to recruitment, because recruitment always tends to happen. It's when you're short-staffed, desperate for time, and you just want to get it done as quickly as possible. So that's great, and you know, I endorse pretty much all of what Daniel was saying, and it's something that we bang on to our clients about a lot. I think the other simple things are, you know, we still get frustrated that clients don't put salaries on job adverts, and you know, please give somebody an idea of the price, because at least gets you into the part to play. I'll maybe ask some of the lawyers on the call to put their fingers in their ears now, but certainly you're talking about flexibility, and you know, lawyers and large organizations like strict policies and strict working patterns, and you know, you have to do these set hours of 9 till 3 because that's our flexi time or whatever. But we as a business, and many of the clients that we've had success in recruiting for, especially with hard to reach candidates at the minute, have a more flexible approach. So it's, yeah, I don't mind if you want to 3 mornings a week come in at 9:45 because you're on the school run, or by all means, if you have to nip out in the middle of the day, do the school run. We in our own business, sort of my team work probably 7:30 in the morning till 7 at night, but might disappear for a couple of hours during the day to go to the gym or do whatever they want to do. And I measure their output. That's really all I'm interested in. But that's a real mind change, a mind shift. And I've probably noticed over the last couple of years, the generational shift that you started off your conversation with. So, you know, whatever you want to call them, Gen Z, Y, whatever, but probably the under 30s-ish have a completely different view of what work should look like and what work-life balance is like, compared to, you know, the grey-haired amongst us who, you know, we're in that mindset of you turn up 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and flexi working means you can nip off half hour early if you give half an hour of your lunch, kind of thing. So there's a complete perception change there. But really, really useful stuff. I think the only other point I would add, and I've mentioned it before, is in terms of writing advertising copy, there are some really useful tools about gender language. because we'll all have a natural sort of unconscious bias to write an advert in the words that we always refer to when we're describing our job. But there is quite a difference in terms of appeal to different genders. So by all means, look one of those up. But no, really enjoyable. Thank you very much.
I always share the link that you gave, Mike. We shared it at the National Women's Network as well, because we talked about gender bias there. So I'll share it again in terms of Mike shared a couple of website tools that you can use to put in your advert, and it shows you whether they're male or female biased. So
it's really, really interesting. Our CEO, Cheryl, our founder, is actually, there's a big industry conference in April, towards the end of April, called Brighton SEO, which is it's the industry leading conference internationally for search engine optimization. And she's doing a talk on unconscious bias and gender bias. And it's really interesting because that's the balance with all the technical and work related things that are going down there. It's the more modern, we're an agency, we've got a very young team. Like agencies, digital marketing is still an incredibly young industry. So it's so important because, as you say, that Gen Z versus millennial versus all the boom, different generations, it's how those kind of workplace expectations are changing, really. And I do think that there's a lot of that in terms of the unconscious bias side of things, not the active negative, but the unconscious element of it that's really important. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
It definitely reflects the age demographics as well, with the language used in adverts.
Right, yeah.
Adverts saying we're looking for vibrant, dynamic, is that excluding the older generation? You've got to be so careful with wording of adverts all around, and when writing your EVPs and things like that, and how you're promoting yourself. So there's the linguistics of it is far more complex. Like Mike said, it's not just the genders that are getting sort of differentiated subconsciously. It can be so many other factors to take in as well. So it's a bit of a minefield, but really interesting when you start delving into it.
It's amazing what the journey you end up going on, isn't it, in that sense, what that looks like. I'm conscious of the time, and actually Joe is with us. She's on the user iPhone. You're there, Joe? Yes,
I am indeed. Hi, good morning, everyone.
So let's introduce Joe Smith to you. So Joe's from DWP and the Job Centre Plus. So you've been looking at some of the things they can help with. So I've got some stuff to share with you, which I'll send out after this meeting, but it was an opportunity to introduce Joe to everybody. She's been on before, and just to give a quick update on some of the things they're doing and how they can help.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne. Can everyone see me? Can you hear me? Yeah, grand. Cool. I'll be really, really quick because I'm conscious of time. It's just to say hi. My job role presently is to try and encourage you guys to work with Job Centre Plus. We get an awful lot of job seekers into work through direct access to some of our key employers in the county. I look after a team of 12. And we are all really, really focused on trying to help job seekers get into some sort of meaningful work. We also talk to employers about work experience. We can help facilitate work placements and be the conduit, I guess, between your job vacancies and people that are looking for work. So Universal Credit was brought in to help people take on any kind of job which will help them be more financially independent. And I guess it's around any job, a better job, and then going into careers. We've done an awful lot recently around Apprenticeship Week. I've got some fact sheets that I'd like to share via Suzanne around how Universal Credit can actually help you and help you to recruit people. We see time and time again job seekers saying, I can only do this amount of hours, blah, blah, blah. I've got issues with childcare. We are in a position via DWP to be able to try and support those people as best we can through our flexible support funds. We might be able to help them with childcare. We might be able to help them with clothing for work. We can help them with meaningful conversations around mock interviews and getting them ready to do their best when they come to you. I do absolutely have an email. I will, Suzanne, please share. I've got an updated version of the Job Centre Plus offer, and also the how Universal Credit can help you. I'd love to make new connections with you guys. And whilst we're on the call, I might as well tell you about some events we've got coming up. So we hold regular jobs fairs across our 8 job centres. Some are sector specific, so we might focus on sort of hands-on manual type work. One week, the next week it might be recruitment agencies, the following week it might be the care sector and all those jobs that come underneath the care sector. And the other thing to say is that, and that happens in every single job centre. The other thing is that is massive piece of work that I'm working with Richard Graham on, our MP for Gloucester. He's very keen, stood up in the House a couple of weeks ago now and invited the Minister for Employment to come to Gloucester to a jobs fair. So we've secured the Guildhall in the centre of Gloucester for the 23rd of March. The event starts at 10, finishes at 2 o'clock. We are inviting employers who are keen to hire people who are older. So you were talking about the Gen Z. I'm really focusing this one on people that are 45 and above. I'm not going to say 50 plus because that's the umbrella of it, but I fall into that bracket as well now. So very keen to support the experience that all the older workers bring. Rich has popped on his social media last evening a brilliantly enthusing introduction to the event. So if anybody is really interested in hiring people that have the wealth of experience that over 45s, over 50s can bring and add to your business, please get in touch with me because I'd love to have you come along. It's a really inclusive event. We've pretty much taken over the entire Guildhall. There will be some motivational speakers there as well as support services. And obviously it's not just open to job seekers per se. We're hoping to attract people from the community as well. So a real community event. If you want to get involved, please get in touch with me and I'll see if I can make that happen for you. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Jo. Thank you. There's such a lot that they can help you with at the job centre. So please do. I'll share all Jo's details anyway, and the information Jo has sent. And I'll specifically pull out the Guildhall event on the 23rd so that everybody can have a look at it. And I'll share it with those that couldn't make it this morning as well. I'm conscious of the time, and as we have come close to 11, so that's perfectly planned. Well done, everybody, to get us there. I'll share everybody's details in the group so that you can get hold of individuals, so Sarah's and Daniel's specifically, and Jo, but please do try and catch up with people. I'll share the details of what's coming up that I spoke about. Daniel, if you can share the slides, then I'll make sure that they're on the website, and we'll share with this group of people. And those who couldn't make it, I've had some people did have issues with getting on, and they thought it was too late to hop on. It's never too late to hop on to Zoom. That's the value of Zoom. Nobody minds if you come on late. So, but I will share it with those who couldn't make it this morning as well, and what's coming up. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Sarah and Jo. And we will see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So my computer's hanging. I'm desperately trying to leave. Nothing personal, but it just doesn't want to work.
Leave. I don't want to stay any longer. Well, I'm going to.
By all means, kick me out if you want to. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to end it anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
See you later. Cheers, Mike.